The dress hung in a shroud of sheer garment bag, a specter of pure, unadulterated joy. I'd named it Alara, after some forgotten star in a childhood astronomy book, because from the moment I'd slipped it on in the boutique, I'd felt celestial. It wasn't just a dress, it was a map of my future, woven from silk and satin, embroidered with the delicate constellations of the life Leo and I were supposed to build. I was running my fingers over the bag, feeling the subtle ridges of the lacework beneath, when Leo walked into my dressing room. Our dressing room. His tie was already loosened, a sign of a long day at the office, and he held 2 glasses of champagne. His smile was the same one that had charmed me across a crowded charity gala 2 years ago, a little crooked, entirely confident. "To my beautiful almost wife," he said, handing me a flute. I took it, my heart doing that familiar foolish flutter. "To us. In 5 days this becomes my official uniform." 5 days too long," he murmured, kissing my temple. His eyes drifted to the bag. I was thinking. "A dangerous pastime," I teased, sipping the crisp, bubbling wine. "About the dress," he said, his tone shifting into something more practical, the tone he used for business mergers. "It's a masterpiece, Isabella. A work of art." "I know," I said, warmth spreading through my chest. "I still can't believe you talked me into the custom Valentino. Nothing but the best for my queen." He set his glass down on the vanity, his movements deliberate. "But it's also a one-time wear. An enormous investment for a single day." A tiny, cold pinprick of unease touched the base of my spine. "It's not an investment, Leo. It's my wedding dress. It's everything." "I know, darling, I know." He paced slowly in front of the dress, a collector appraising a prized possession. "But art should be appreciated. It should be seen. It's a shame for it to hang here and then in a box for the rest of its life." "Where is this coming from?" I asked, the champagne suddenly tasting sour. He stopped and turned to me, his expression open, reasonable. "Chloe is attending the Gilded Arch Awards next week." The name was a splash of ice water. Chloe. His newest, most high-profile client. A rising socialite whose fame was inversely proportional to her talent. She was all sharp angles and sharper tongue, and Leo had been spending an inordinate amount of time managing her brand. "And?" I prompted, my voice dangerously quiet. "And she's desperate for a statement piece. Something virginal yet powerful. Unique." She saw the sketch the designer sent over and fell in love. "It would be perfect for her." He said it so casually, as if suggesting we lend her a spare umbrella. "Think of the press, Isabella. My client in a Valentino prototype? It would be a sensation. It would be good for all of us." I stared at him, my mind refusing to assemble the words into a coherent, logical sentence. He wanted to give my wedding dress, my Ilara, the physical manifestation of my vows to him, to another woman to wear to a red carpet event before I'd even worn it down the aisle. You want to give my wedding dress to Chloe?" The words were ash in my mouth. "Not give, darling. A business arrangement. She'll wear it, it'll get phenomenal exposure, and then it comes right back freshly cleaned and pressed for our wedding. It's the smart thing to do." "The smart thing to do," I repeated, numb. The room felt like it was tilting. This wasn't jealousy. This was a fundamental dismantling of a sacred promise. The dress was a symbol. He was proposing to desecrate it, to turn the most personal garment of my life into a publicity stunt for his mistress. The thought landed with the force of a physical blow. His mistress. I had suspected, of course. The late nights that smelled of a different perfume, the new secretive passcode on his phone, the way he'd flinch if I touched him while he was texting. I had buried the suspicions, chalking it up to pre-wedding jitters and the high-pressure world of celebrity management. But this was a confession. This was him valuing her need for a statement piece, over my need for a sacred symbol. He saw the storm in my eyes and misread it as mere upset. He stepped forward, taking my hands. His were warm, dry. Mine were frozen. "Isabella, don't be dramatic. It's his fabric. I'll buy you a new one. A better one. We'll fly to Paris tomorrow. We'll get you a Dior, a Chanel, anything you want. I'll buy you a new one for you. I'll buy you a new one." Those 6 words severed the last fragile thread holding my world together. It wasn't about the cost. It was about the meaning. He truly believed everything had a price, that every emotional wound could be sutured with a more expensive bandage. My love, my trust, my wedding dress. They were all just line items on a balance sheet, and he was offering a credit. I looked from his face, so handsome and so utterly blind, to the shrouded form of Alara. My future, my past, all dissolving in the acid of his betrayal. The fight didn't leave me. It crystallized into something hard, sharp, and silent. I let go of his hands. I placed my full, untouched glass of champagne on the vanity next to his. The crystal made a soft, final click against the marble. I said nothing. I walked to the closet past my wedding dress and took only my purse and the car keys. I didn't look at him. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I left the room, I left the apartment, and I left the woman I was supposed to become in 5 days standing there silently in that dressing room. The drive to my best friend Maya's apartment was a blur. I don't remember the streets or the traffic lights. I only remember the cold, clear space opening up inside me, a void where my love for Leo had been, waiting to be filled with something else entirely. Maya opened her door, took one look at my face, and pulled me into a hug so tight I thought my ribs would crack. She didn't ask any questions. She led me to her overstuffed sofa, pushed a mug of scaldingly hot tea into my hands, and waited. The story came out in ragged, toneless pieces. The dress. Chloe. His offer. I'll buy you a new one. When I finished, I expected to collapse into sobs. Instead, I felt a profound, unsettling calm. I'm going to break the engagement, I said. The words didn't feel like mine. They felt like stones I was dropping into a still pond. Okay, Maya said, her voice steady. What do you need? I need my things from the apartment. I can't face him. Consider it done. My brother and I will go. Leo won't dare make a scene with witnesses. She squeezed my knee. What else? I looked around Maya's cozy, chaotic apartment. It was the antithesis of Leo's minimalist, cold penthouse. Here, books were stacked on the floor, a half-finished painting sat on an easel by the window, and the air smelled of turmeric and cumin. It was a home lived in and loved in. I need a lawyer, I said, the practical part of my brain, the part that had helped me build my own interior design firm from scratch, kicking into gear. And I need to not be in the city for a while. An idea, fragile but persistent, began to form. For the past 2 years, my life had been a satellite to Leo's. His schedule, his social obligations, his taste. My own identity, my business, my friendships had all been gently, persistently eroded to make space for us. Now there was no us. There was only me. And I had forgotten what I looked like. I spent the next week in a state of strange, productive numbness. Maya and her brother retrieved my belongings while Leo was at work. He called my phone 40-50 times a day. He sent flowers to Maya's, then jewelry. Each gift was more extravagant than the last, each voicemail more pleading. He was sorry, he was a fool, he didn't understand why I was being so extreme. He'd just been trying to be practical. He loved me. He couldn't get married without me. I blocked his number. My lawyer, a formidable woman named Ruth with a gaze that could strip paint, handled him with brutal efficiency. There was no prenup, a fact Leo had been lazily meaning to rectify. My firm was mine, established long before him. His wealth was his. The separation was, in the cold eyes of the law, clean. But the emotional disentanglement was a slower, more meticulous process. I rented a small, sun-drenched cottage on a remote stretch of the New England coast. I told my clients I was taking a sudden sabbatical for family reasons. I didn't look at social media. I didn't read the gossip columns that, Maya informed me, were buzzing with speculation about the society wedding of the year being called off. For the first few days I did nothing. I sat on the porch and watched the ocean. I learned the patterns of the tides. I breathed air that didn't smell of exhaust and ambition. The silence was at first deafening, then soothing. Slowly I began to remember. I remembered that I loved the smell of old books and wet earth. I remembered that I hated caviar in the opera. I remembered that my favorite color wasn't the tasteful, neutral gray of Leo's penthouse, but the violent, glorious orange of a sunset over the water. I started sketching again. Not floor plans or fabric swatches for clients, but wild, impractical things. Gardens that couldn't exist, rooms built inside giant trees, houses made of light and glass. I was rebuilding myself from the foundation up, and this time I was the architect. It was during this quiet revolution that I first thought of Alexander Thorne. Thorne. The name was a curse word in Leo's vocabulary. His biggest rival in the cutthroat world of venture capital and tech investments. Where Leo was slick, polished, and leveraged connections, Thorn was known as a maverick, a man who backed disruptive, visionary ideas based on their merit, not their social pedigree. Their feud was legendary, born at Harvard Business School and fueled by a decade of competing deals. Leo saw Thorn as an uncouth barbarian. Thorn saw Leo as a parasitic relic. I'd only met Alexander Thorn once at one of Leo's interminable cocktail parties. Leo had been in his element, holding court, while I had been playing my part as the elegant, silent accessory. Thorn had been standing alone by the grand piano, looking profoundly bored. He was nothing like Leo. He was taller, broader, with a quiet, physical presence that didn't need to command a room because it simply anchored it. His suit was expensive but looked lived in, and his handshake had been firm, his gaze direct and unsettlingly perceptive. He'd looked at me past the designer dress and the perfect makeup and said, "Isabella, Leo says you're the genius behind aesthetic foundations. The restoration of the old Grand Library was breathtaking. It's a crime he only trots you out as arm candy." Leo had overheard, flushed with anger, and quickly steered me away, muttering about Thorn's pathetic attempts at provocation. But the words had stuck with me. He'd seen the professional, not just the partner. Now, sitting in my cottage surrounded by my rebirth, I thought of that moment. I thought about Leo's world, a world of surfaces and transactions. And I thought about revenge. It wouldn't be a screaming match. It wouldn't be a lawsuit. It wouldn't be petty. Leo's sin was that he believed everything, including love, was a commodity. The truest revenge then would be to show him that some things were priceless. And to take everything he valued, his pride, his social standing, his sense of victory, and hand it to the man he despised most. I opened my laptop, my heart pounding not with anxiety, but with a fierce, clean purpose. I found the contact information for Alexander Thorn's flagship company, Ethelred Holdings. I composed an email. It was brief, professional, and to the point. "Dear Mr. Thorn, you may not remember me. My name is Isabella Rossi. We met briefly at a function hosted by Leo Montera. I am the owner of Aesthetic Foundations, an interior design firm. I am currently on sabbatical but am exploring new, passion-driven architectural and design ventures. Given your firm's focus on innovative and sustainable projects, I was wondering if you might have 15 minutes for a virtual coffee in the coming weeks to discuss the landscape. No obligation, of course. Best, Isabella Rossi." I read it over twice. It was a seed. A hook. Nothing more. I wasn't even sure what I was proposing. I just knew I needed a bridge to a world outside of Leo's, a world that operated on a different set of rules. I took a deep breath of the salty air and hit send. The reply came in less than an hour. "Ms. Rossi, I remember you. I was sorry to hear about your personal troubles. A virtual coffee is a profoundly unsatisfying concept. I'm in Portland closing a deal tomorrow. I'll be driving back down the coast the day after. If you're amenable, I'd prefer to discuss new ventures in person. Name the place and time. Sincerely, Alexander Thorn." Attached was his personal cell phone number. I looked out at the ocean where the waves were crashing against the rocks with relentless, powerful grace. The game, it seemed, was already afoot. I chose a small, weathered clapboard cafe perched on a cliff edge, a place that smelled of salt, fried clams, and strong coffee. It was the polar opposite of the sterile, minimalist bistros Leo favored. I arrived early, choosing a table by the window that looked out over the endless, gray-blue expanse of the Atlantic. I wore jeans, a simple white linen shirt, and my hair in a loose braid. I felt more like myself than I had in years. Alexander Thorn arrived exactly on time. He moved through the cafe with a natural, unassuming authority, nodding a thanks to the young hostess who blushed as she pointed him toward my table. He was dressed as he had been at the party. Dark jeans, a navy crewneck sweater over a collared shirt, a heavy watch on his wrist. He looked like a man who had more important things to do than worry about his appearance. "Ms. Rossi," he said, his voice a low baritone that fit the rugged surroundings. He didn't offer a hand, just gave a small, respectful nod as he sat down. "Mr. Thorn, thank you for driving out here." "Alexander, please." "And it was my pleasure." Beats the hell out of I-95. His eyes, a startlingly clear shade of gray-green like the sea after a storm, scanned my face, not with judgment but with a quiet, intense focus. "You look well. The coast agrees with you." It was a simple observation, but it felt more genuine than any of Leo's lavish, performative compliments. It does, I agreed. It's helping me remember who I am. A waitress came and he ordered a black coffee and a piece of whatever pie was fresh. I ordered the same. So, he said, leaning back in his chair. The wood creaked under his weight. You said new ventures. And you emailed me, of all people. I have to admit my curiosity is piqued. I took a steadying breath. I'm leaving my old life behind. That includes the social circle, the expectations, and the professional niche I'd carved for myself. My firm does very well, but it's safe. It's palatable. For the past few weeks I've been sketching, dreaming. I have ideas for spaces that are more than just beautiful. They're integrated, sustainable, emotionally intelligent. I paused, gathering my courage. I think there's a market for a new kind of design firm. One that partners with developers from the ground up, not just comes in at the end to pick out throw pillows. One that challenges the sterile glass box aesthetic that dominates the city. He listened, his gaze never leaving my face. He didn't interrupt. He just absorbed. Leo's world is all about the facade, I continued, my voice gaining strength. The right address, the right art, the right wife. It's a beautiful shell with nothing at its core. I want to build things with a core. I want to create homes, not assets. Communities, not investments. Our pie arrived, a messy, glorious blueberry concoction with a lattice crust. Alexander picked up his fork. You're talking about going directly against the grain of the entire Montera portfolio, he said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. His new Aura towers are the epitome of the glass box you despise. I know. And you're proposing this to me, his business rival. He took a bite of pie. This feels like more than a business proposal, Isabella. I met his gaze squarely. It is. It's a personal one. Leo believes everything and everyone has a price. He believed he could buy me a new wedding dress and that would fix the fact that he gave the one that held all my dreams to his mistress. I want to show him he's wrong. I want to build something so beautiful, so meaningful, and so publicly successful that it becomes a permanent, glaring testament to his poor judgment. Not just in women but in everything. I had laid my cards on the table. The desire for revenge, the professional ambition, the personal rebirth. It was all there, raw and exposed. Alexander was silent for a long moment, finishing his pie, his expression unreadable. I braced for dismissal, for a lecture on the dangers of mixing business with personal vendetta. Instead, he pushed his empty plate away and said, "Good pie." I blinked. What? The pie. It's excellent. He took a sip of his coffee. You're right, of course. About Leo. He's a brilliant tactician but a terrible strategist. He can win a battle but he doesn't understand the war. He sees people as pieces and he's just lost his queen. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table. What you're describing, a holistic, human-centric design and development firm, it's not just a good idea. It's the future. The market is ripe for it. Montera and his ilk are dinosaurs, they just don't know it yet. My heart began to beat faster. I've been looking for a way to pivot Ethelred into more tangible legacy projects, he continued. Tech is fleeting. Buildings, communities, they last. I have the capital, the land, the regulatory muscle. What I don't have is the vision. The soul. He gestured with his fork toward my notebook where I'd been idly sketching during my wait. You have the soul. So, you're interested? I asked, hardly daring to believe it. I'm in, he said simply. We'll form a new entity. A partnership. 50-50. You bring the vision, the design, the creative direction. I bring the business infrastructure, the funding, the land. Our first project will be a statement. Something that will make Leo Montera's Aura Towers look like the tacky, soulless boxes they are. The audacity of it, the speed of it left me breathless. This was not how things were done in Leo's world. There were months of meetings, lawyers, due diligence. Just like that. I whispered. Life's too short for anything else, Alexander said, his gaze steady on mine. I trust my gut. And my gut tells me you're a force to be reckoned with, Isabella Rossi. Leo was a fool to underestimate you. I don't intend to make the same mistake. He paid the bill, refusing to let me contribute. We walked out into the brisk ocean air together. The wind whipped my hair across my face. I'll have my lawyers draw up the preliminary papers this week, he said, standing by his rugged, mud-splattered Land Rover. This is going to be fun. He wasn't just talking about the business. As I watched him drive away, I felt it, the first real spark of life since I'd walked out of that dressing room. This wasn't just an escape. It was an ascent. And Alexander Thorne wasn't just a partner. He was an ally. And I suspected with a thrill that was both terrifying and exhilarating he might become something more. The following months were a whirlwind of a different kind. Where my life with Leo had been a curated performance of leisure and luxury, my life now was a hurricane of purposeful, exhilarating work. My cottage became a war room. The walls were plastered with architectural sketches, topographical maps, material samples and fluid dynamic charts for the geothermal systems we were planning. "We" was the operative word. Alexander and I. Our partnership was a fascinating dance. He was sharp, decisive, and possessed a terrifying intellect that could dissect a financial model in minutes. But he never once dismissed my ideas as fanciful or impractical. He challenged them, yes, forcing me to defend my choices, to consider the engineering, the cost, the long-term sustainability. But he did it with a respect that was intoxicating. Our first project was to be Anchorage, a residential community on a stunning, rugged parcel of coastline he owned an hour north of the city. It wasn't about maximizing square footage or views for the highest bidder. It was about creating a dialogue between the built environment and the natural one. The homes would be nestled into the landscape, built with reclaimed timber and local stone, with living roofs and systems that made them nearly self-sufficient. I was in my element, my passion for design finally fused with a greater purpose. Alexander handled the boardrooms and the bankers, a stoic, immovable force who shielded me completely from the business pressures, allowing me to focus entirely on the creative vision. We spent long days together on the site, our boots caked in mud, the wind tearing at our blueprints. We'd argue passionately about the angle of a roofline or the sourcing of a specific type of slate, only to fall into a comfortable silence as we watched the sunset over the half-finished structures. It was during one of these sunsets, standing on the skeleton of what would be the community's central lodge, that he asked me about it. "The dress," he said, his voice quiet against the crash of the waves below. I stiffened slightly. We never spoke of Leo directly. He was the specter haunting our venture, the unnamed adversary, but we focused on the future we were building, not the past I was fleeing. "What about it?" I asked, my eyes fixed on the horizon. "Did you ever get it back?" I let out a short, humorless laugh. "No. According to my lawyer, Leo claimed it was a gift, therefore his property to do with as he pleased. Chloe wore it to the Gilded Arch Awards. There were pictures. I had seen one just once flashed on a newsstand. Chloe, skeletal and triumphant, swimming in the delicate bodice that had been tailored to my curves. She'd accessorized it with a garish diamond necklace and a smirk. It had felt like a public violation. Maya had wanted to burn the magazine stand down. Alexander was silent for a long moment. "A man who does that," he said finally, his voice low and hard, "doesn't deserve to breathe the same air as you." The ferocity in his tone surprised me. I glanced at him. His profile was etched against the dying light, jaw tight, hands shoved deep into the pockets of his wax jacket. This wasn't business rivalry. This was something deeper, more personal. "It's just a dress," I said, echoing Leo's words but with a completely different meaning. For me it was a statement of freedom. The dress no longer held power over me. "It wasn't," he replied, his gaze still on the horizon. "It was a flag. And he gave it to the enemy. We'll make sure he regrets it every time he looks at the skyline and sees one of our buildings casting a shadow on his." The "we" settled something deep inside me. As the weeks turned into months, the professional boundary between us began to blur with a slow, inevitable grace. It was in the way his hand would linger on the small of my back as he guided me through a construction site. It was in the shared thermos of coffee on cold mornings, our fingers brushing. It was in the way he'd watch me when I was deep in thought, a quiet, intense look on his face that had nothing to do with business. The shift happened the night we secured the final zoning approval for Anchorage. We were in his city apartment, a sprawling loft-like space that was surprisingly warm and lived in, filled with books and strange artifacts from his travels. It was nothing like Leo's cold museum. We'd opened a bottle of expensive scotch not to show off, but to genuinely celebrate a hard-fought victory. "To Anchorage," I said, raising my glass. "To the architect," he replied, his eyes holding mine. The air between us crackled. The careful distance we'd maintained collapsed. He set his glass down, stepped closer and cupped my face in his hands. His touch was not a demand but a question. "Isabella," he murmured, my name a prayer on his lips. And I answered him by rising onto my toes and kissing him. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a conflagration. Months of suppressed attraction, of shared ambition, of mutual respect, exploded into a single devastating point of contact. It was the feeling of a door long locked, swinging open onto a sun-drenched landscape I never knew existed. It was passion, yes, but it was also a profound sense of coming home. Later, tangled in the sheets of his bed, the city lights glittering outside the window, I traced the scar on his shoulder. "This is complicated," I whispered. "No, it's not," he said, his voice rough with sleep and satisfaction. "It's the simplest thing in the world. I've wanted you since I saw you standing by that piano, looking like you'd rather be anywhere else. I just had to wait for you to be free. And the business, the partnership. It makes it better," he said, pulling me closer. "We're not just building a company, Isabella. We're building a life. And I have a feeling it's going to be a goddamn masterpiece." Lying in his arms, I knew he was right. This wasn't a rebound. This wasn't a revenge plot, though the revenge would be all the sweeter. This was the second love I hadn't dared to hope for. A partnership forged in respect, fueled by shared ambition, and rooted in a bone-deep understanding of who I truly was. Leo had tried to replace me with a newer model. Alexander was building a kingdom with the original blueprints. The world discovered us, as I knew it would, at the unveiling of the Anchorage model home. We hadn't hidden our partnership, but we'd kept a low profile, working away from the media glare. The architectural and design world, however, was buzzing with rumors about Thorne's mysterious new pet project. We decided to control the narrative. We invited a curated list of press, influencers, and, most importantly, key figures from the real estate and investment world. It was a calculated move. We were ready to show our hand. The day was crisp and bright, the kind of autumn day that makes every color seem more vivid. The model home, a low-slung structure of glass, stone, and weathered wood, seemed to grow organically from the cliffside. Inside, it was a symphony of light and texture. I had designed every detail, from the custom furniture made from salvaged ship timbers to the artisanal tiles in the bathroom. It was warm, livable, and utterly breathtaking. I stood near the entrance, wearing a simple, elegant dress the color of deep moss green, my hand resting lightly on Alexander's arm. He was in a dark suit, but he'd foregone a tie, looking more like a landowner than a suit. We were a united front. The guests arrived, their cars crunching on the gravel drive. I saw the looks of astonishment on their faces as they took in the home. This was not what they had expected from the notoriously ruthless Alexander Thorne. And then I saw him. Leo. He hadn't been invited, of course. But he had come, drawn by the gossip, by the threat. He stood at the back of the growing crowd, his face a mask of cold fury. He was thinner, and there was a new tightness around his eyes. He looked at the house, at the crowd, and then his eyes found me. They widened in shock, then narrowed into slits of pure, undiluted hatred. His gaze dropped to my hand on Alexander's arm, and I saw a muscle in his jaw twitch violently. Alexander felt me tense. He leaned down, his voice a whisper for my ear only. "Steady, my love. This is our moment. Don't let him poison it." He was right. I lifted my chin, met Leo's glare with a calm, detached smile, and turned my attention back to our guests. The formal presentation began. Alexander spoke first, his voice carrying easily over the crowd. He spoke not of profit margins but of legacy. Of building homes that honored the land, that fostered community, that were a testament to intelligent, humane design. Then he introduced me. The soul of Anchorage, the vision behind every line, every texture, every space you see here is my partner, Isabella Rossi. The word partner, hung in the air, weighted with multiple meanings. There was a ripple of applause. I stepped forward, my heart pounding, but my voice was clear and strong. I spoke about my design philosophy, about the flow of energy in a home, about creating shelters that were not just structures but sanctuaries. I talked about the locally sourced materials, the passive solar design, the rainwater harvesting. I saw the journalists scribbling furiously, the influencers holding up their phones. I saw respect in the eyes of hardened industry veterans. I had become what Leo had never allowed me to be, a force in my own right. After the speeches, as people mingled and explored the house, Leo made his move. He cornered me near the fireplace, his body vibrating with suppressed rage. Isabella, he hissed. What is this? Some pathetic attempt to get back at me? Align yourself with that. He jerked his head toward Alexander, who was watching us from across the room like a hawk, ready to intervene. Hello, Leo, I said, my voice cool. I'm surprised to see you here. I didn't think this would be your style. You're making a fool of yourself, he spat, his voice low. And you're embarrassing me. This little stunt, this shat. Thorn is using you, can't you see that? He's using you to get to me. I almost felt sorry for him. His worldview was so small, so transactional, that he couldn't conceive of a connection that wasn't a weapon. Alexander isn't using me, Leo. He sees me. He values my talent. He's my partner. In every sense of the word. The color drained from his face. You're sleeping with him. It was an accusation, a profanity. I'm building a life with him, I corrected gently. Something you and I never had. You had an accessory. He has a partner. He leaned in closer, his breath smelling of expensive whiskey and desperation. I can give it all back to you, Isabella. Everything. We can forget this ever happened. The dress. It was a mistake. A colossal mistake. I'll fire Chloe. We can get married next month. Just call this farce off. It was the same old song. The belief that he could simply buy or bully his way out of any consequence. He was offering me the gilded cage again, but I had already flown. There's nothing to call off, Leo, I said, my voice firm. My life with you is over. This, I gestured around the beautiful sun-filled room, is my future. And you are not a part of it. I saw the plea in his eyes then, the genuine, bewildered hurt of a man who has lost a prized possession and cannot understand why it won't come back when he calls. But it was too late. The love I'd had for him was gone, scraped out of me and replaced with something stronger. You'll regret this, he whispered, his voice cracking. No, Leo, I said, turning away from him for the last time. I already don't. I walked away toward Alexander, who opened his arms and folded me into an embrace that felt like a fortress. Over his shoulder, I saw Leo standing alone by the fireplace, a lonely, bitter figure in the midst of our triumph. The first act of our revenge was complete. We had unveiled not just a house but our alliance. And we had shown him publicly and irrevocably that what he had thrown away, his greatest rival now treasured. The Anchorage unveiling was the talk of the town. Offers for the lots came flooding in. My design firm was inundated with requests. I was no longer Leo Montera's ex-fiancée. I was Isabella Rossi, visionary. And Alexander Thorne was the man smart enough to stand by her side. A year to the day after I had walked out of Leo's penthouse, Alexander and I were sitting on the porch of my cottage, now our weekend retreat. The Anchorage project was a roaring success, and we were already scouting locations for the next one. Our life was a happy, chaotic blend of hard work and deep contentment. The ghost of Leo Montera had been largely exorcised, relegated to a cautionary tale and an occasional piece of industry gossip. It was a quiet evening. Alexander was reading a report and I was sketching ideas for a new line of sustainable furniture. The peace was broken by his phone buzzing. He glanced at it, frowned, and showed me the screen. It was an email from a Mrs. Eleanor Davenport, the undisputed queen of New York high society. She was a woman so old, so rich, and so connected that she transcended the petty rivalries of men like Leo and Alexander. An invitation from her was a command. Dear Mr. Thorne and Ms. Rossi, you are cordially invited to the wedding of my granddaughter, Seraphina Davenport, to Mr. Julian Ashworth. The rest of the details blurred. The wedding was in 3 months. At the Cathedral of St. John the Divine. Reception at the Davenport estate in the Hamptons. It was set to be the social event of the decade. We have to go, Alexander said, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. It's the perfect arena. Arena for what? I asked, though I already knew. For the final move, he said, putting his phone down and taking my hand. Isabella, let's stop building our life in the shadow of your past. Let's start our own future. Properly. He got down on one knee right there on the weathered porch planks. The ocean roared in the distance, a witness to our private moment. Isabella Rossi, he said, his gray-green eyes serious and full of a love that still took my breath away. You are the most brilliant, beautiful, and resilient person I have ever known. Building a life with you is the greatest privilege of mine. Marry me. Make me the happiest, luckiest man on the planet. Tears welled in my eyes, but they were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. Yes, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Yes, Alexander. 1,000 times yes. He slid a ring onto my finger. It wasn't a cold, perfect diamond like the one Leo had given me. It was a unique raw-cut emerald, the exact color of my dress the day we unveiled Anchorage, set in twisted bands of rose and white gold. It was strong, unique, and utterly me. We decided then and there. We would get married at the Davenport wedding. Not at it, of course. But we would use the occasion, the gathering of the entire world that had once known me as Leo's fiancée, to make our announcement. We would secure Mrs. Davenport's blessing. Alexander was confident he could, given a lucrative charitable donation he could facilitate for her foundation, to make a small, tasteful announcement at the reception. It would be a masterstroke. The planning was a delicious secret. We told no one but Maya and Alexander's most trusted assistant. I didn't want a big wedding. I wanted something intimate, meaningful, and powerful. We settled on a small ceremony on the grounds of the Davenport estate, in a secluded rose garden, an hour before the main reception began. We would have our moment of private vows, and then we would join the grand party as husband and wife. I didn't need a grand dress. I didn't need a cathedral. I had the man and I had the partnership. That was everything. The only thing left was the guest list. For our tiny ceremony, it was just Maya, Alexander's brother, and Mrs. Davenport as our witness. But for the reception that followed, the entire New York elite would be there, including, undoubtedly, Leo Montera. He would be there in black tie, forced to watch as the woman he'd discarded, was unveiled not as Alexander Thorne's partner, but as his wife. The ultimate prize in their lifelong rivalry, won not through business cunning but through love and respect. I didn't send him an invitation. He would receive one from the Davenports. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, I felt a profound sense of peace. This wasn't about revenge anymore. Not really. The revenge had been the byproduct of building a beautiful life. Leo's begging, when it came, would merely be the final, formal confirmation of his loss. The night before the Davenport wedding, Alexander and I lay in bed in a suite overlooking Central Park. Nervous? He asked, his arm wrapped around me. Not even a little, I said, and I meant it. I was marrying my best friend, my partner, my love. The rest was just poetry. Good, he murmured, kissing my hair. Tomorrow the world sees what I see. My wife. The word sent a thrill through me. Tomorrow the silent woman who had left would return, crowned in victory and love. The morning of the Davenport wedding dawned clear and golden. While the city began to stir itself for the spectacle to come, Alexander and I were in the secluded rose garden of the Hampton estate. The air was heavy with the scent of 1,000 blooms, and the only sounds were the buzzing of bees and the distant rhythmic crash of the ocean. It was perfect. I wore a simple, elegant column of ivory silk crepe. It was backless, fluid, and moved with me like a second skin. There were no ruffles, no lace, no train. It was a dress for a woman, not a princess. My hair was down, styled in soft waves, and my only jewelry was my emerald engagement ring and a pair of small diamond studs that had been my mother's. I felt like myself, powerful, loved, and utterly at peace. Alexander stood under a stone archway covered in climbing white roses, waiting for me. He looked devastatingly handsome in his morning suit, his usual ruggedness refined into pure masculine elegance. When he saw me walking toward him on Maya's arm, his breath caught. The look in his eyes was one I would remember for the rest of my life. Awe, reverence, and a love so deep it was almost tangible. Maya, my rock, squeezed my hand before placing it in Alexander's. Her eyes were shining with tears. "Go get your happily ever after, boss," she whispered. The ceremony was brief, personal, and profound. We had written our own vows. "Isabella," Alexander began, his voice steady and sure, holding both my hands in his. "You walked into my life like a quiet storm and you rebuilt the landscape of my heart. You are my greatest investment, my most valued partner, and the love of my life. I vow to stand by your side, to challenge you, to cherish you, and to spend every day making sure you know how deeply you are loved. I am yours completely." Tears streamed down my face, happy and free. It was my turn. "Alexander," I said, my voice clear in the quiet garden. You saw the strength in me when I had forgotten it was there. You offered me not a cage but a foundation upon which to build a kingdom. You are my sanctuary, my equal, and my greatest adventure. I vow to build a life with you that is as beautiful and as enduring as the things we create together. I am yours completely. We exchanged plain platinum bands. When the officiant pronounced us husband and wife, Alexander's kiss was not gentle. It was a claiming, a promise, a celebration. It was the seal on our partnership. We were Mr. and Mrs. Thorne. As we turned, hand in hand, we saw Mrs. Davenport dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. She was a tough old bird, but even she was moved. Well, she said, her voice crisp. That was refreshingly sincere. Welcome to the family, my dears. Now let's go give those vultures upstairs something to really talk about. The main reception was in full swing in the sprawling, opulent ballroom of the Davenport mansion. A string quartet played, champagne flowed, and the cream of society glittered and preened. We entered through a side door, pausing for a moment in the threshold. It was a scene from my past life. The same people, the same air, kisses, the same calculated smiles. For a second I felt a ghost of my old anxiety. Then Alexander squeezed my hand. "Ready, Mrs. Thorne?" he murmured. I looked up at my husband, my partner, my love. "Ready." We stepped into the light. The ripple started small. A gasp. A dropped glass. A nudge. Conversations faltered and died as heads turned. The news spread through the room like a shockwave. Thorne. Isabella Rossi. Married. And then I saw him. Leo was standing near the bar, a glass of whiskey in his hand, holding court with a group of associates. He was laughing at something, the picture of arrogant success. Then he noticed the silence, the shift in attention. He followed the collective gaze. His eyes locked with mine. The color drained from his face so completely he looked like a corpse. His jaw went slack. The glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor, the sound explosively loud in the sudden hush. He didn't seem to notice. He was just staring, his brain visibly short-circuiting, trying to process the impossible image of me in a wedding dress, my hand held possessively by Alexander Thorne. I gave him a small, calm smile. It held no malice, no gloating. It was simply the smile of a woman who was exactly where she was meant to be. That seemed to break him. He took a stumbling step forward. Then another. He was weaving through the crowd, his eyes wild, fixed solely on me. People parted for him, their faces a mixture of pity and morbid fascination. This was better than any society drama they could have imagined. He stopped a few feet from us, his chest heaving. He looked from my face to Alexander's, to our joined hands, to the simple platinum band on my finger. "Isabella," he croaked, his voice broken. What is this?" Alexander answered, his voice calm but carrying across the silent room. "It's my wedding, Montera. I'd say congratulations are in order, but I doubt you mean them." Leo ignored him, his desperate, pleading eyes burning into me. You married him? You married Thorne." "I did, Leo," I said, my voice even and clear. The dam broke. The carefully constructed facade of the powerful businessman crumbled into dust, leaving behind a raw, pathetic wreck of a man. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. Then louder, "No. Isabella, you can't do this to me." He fell to his knees. The collective gasp from the crowd was audible. Leo Montera on his knees in the middle of the Davenport ballroom. "Please," he begged, his voice cracking, tears starting to stream down his face. "Please, Isabella. I was wrong. I was a fool. I'll do anything. Anything. Just don't do this. Don't give yourself to him. You're mine. You were always meant to be mine." He was sobbing now, openly, humiliatingly. He reached for the hem of my dress, but Alexander shifted subtly, blocking his reach. "Get up, Leo," Alexander said, his voice low with disgust. "You're making a scene." "I don't care." Leo wailed, his begging now directed at me, his words a messy, desperate torrent. "I love you. I've always loved you. The dress, it was a mistake. A stupid, horrible mistake. I'll get it back. I'll fire Chloe. I'll buy you 100 dresses. Just, please, don't marry him. Forgive me. Take me back. I'm begging you." I looked down at the man I had once thought I would spend my life with. The man who had valued me so little he could give my wedding dress away. The man who believed every problem could be solved with a purchase order. Now he was offering me the highest currency he knew. His own abject humiliation. It wasn't satisfying. It was sad. And it was final. I knelt down so I was level with him. The room held its breath. I looked into his tear-streaked, desperate face. "Leo," I said softly so only he could hear. "I don't want your apologies. I don't want your dresses. I don't want you. I have everything I need. The chapter of my life with you is over. It's time for you to accept that and move on." I stood up, turning my back on him. I took my husband's arm. Alexander looked down at his rival, broken and weeping on the floor. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. His victory was absolute. And as we walked away through the silent, stunned, and utterly captivated crowd, I felt nothing. Because my happiness was so complete, his loss was rendered inconsequential. And yet his public breakdown was the perfect poetic full stop to our story. As the string quartet tentatively started up again, and the whispers began to swell into a roar, Alexander leaned down and kissed me. "Now," he said, his eyes shining with love and pride, "the fun really begins." The aftermath of the Davenport reception was a media frenzy the likes of which I had never experienced. We had planned a small announcement. We got a global spectacle. The video of Leo Montera begging on his knees, of me calmly rejecting him, of Alexander Thorne's stoic triumph, was everywhere. The story had everything: sex, money, power, betrayal, and the most delicious revenge narrative anyone could have concocted. But for Alexander and me, tucked away on a private island for our honeymoon, it was just noise. The real story was the quiet one. The story of us. We returned to a new reality. I was no longer just a successful designer. I was a symbol. A symbol of resilience, of quiet strength, of the power of walking away and building something better. Women wrote to me telling me my story had given them the courage to leave their own Leos. It was humbling. My design firm, now merged with Ethelred Holdings under the New Banner Foundation, became the most sought after in the world. We weren't just building houses. We were building a new paradigm. Leo's company, Montera Ventures, floundered. The public humiliation had shattered his aura of invincibility. Investors grew nervous. His aura towers, once symbols of luxury, now seemed garish and outdated next to the soulful, intelligent beauty of our Anchorage community. Within 2 years, his company was acquired in a hostile takeover. The buyer was Ethelred Holdings. Alexander didn't do it out of spite. He did it because it was, as he said, the smart thing to do. The assets were valuable, the price was right. It was business. The fact that it was the final, crushing defeat for Leo was simply a satisfying side effect. We never saw or heard from Leo directly again. Rumor had it he'd moved to Switzerland, a broken man living off what was left of his family's money. Chloe, of course, had dropped him the moment he became a social liability. The dress, I heard, was sold at auction to pay off some of his debts. I hoped it found a good home. One evening, 5 years after our wedding, I was standing on the porch of our home, the first house we built for ourselves on the cliffs near Anchorage. Our son, a sturdy, laughing 3-year-old with his father's gray-green eyes, was chasing fireflies in the garden below. Alexander came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist and resting his chin on my shoulder. "Happy anniversary, my love," he murmured. It wasn't our wedding anniversary. It was the anniversary of the day I had walked out of Leo's penthouse. Alexander had remembered every year. He called it my Independence Day. "Happy anniversary," I said, leaning back into his solid warmth. We watched our son, his little hands cupped around a flickering light, his face a picture of wonder. "Do you ever think about it?" Alexander asked quietly. "What would have happened if you hadn't left that day?" I thought about it. The life I would have had. The beautiful, lonely prison of being Mrs. Leonardo Montera. The constant compromises, the slow erosion of my spirit. The betrayal that would have inevitably come in other forms again and again. "No," I said, and it was the truth. "That woman, she's a stranger to me. She was a ghost, and I laid her to rest the moment I walked out that door." He turned me in his arms, his gaze serious. "He gave away a dress and lost a kingdom. I gained a queen." I smiled, reaching up to touch his face. "And I gained a partner. A real one." The revenge had been sweet, yes. But it was a fleeting flavor. The man, the child, the home we had built together, the life we had forged from the ashes of my old one. This was the lasting taste. This was the foundation of forever. The silent woman had found her voice. The discarded fiancé had become a wife, a mother, a visionary. And the man who had tried to buy her a new wedding dress was now just a footnote in the story of her glorious, triumphant, and deeply loved life. As the stars began to pepper the velvety sky above, mirroring the fireflies in the garden below, I knew the story was truly, perfectly complete. The end.